Trump is not waiting to start his authoritarian agenda. He is already executing it. From deporting citizens without trial to firing government regulators en masse and using the National Guard against citizens, this is the most dangerous presidency in American history. The No Kings protest didn't start from nothing. It started because Americans are waking up. In the last 5 months, we've watched his administration escalate into something more dangerous than just politics as usual. This is a coordinated assault on the foundations of our republic. Millions have taken to the streets in one of the largest protests in American history. Not just against the growing corruption or nonsensical policy, but against the threat of authoritarianism. Trump has already deported American citizens who dare to oppose him into what can only be described as El Salvadorian death camps. Now, he's openly flirting with the idea of staying in power beyond 2 terms, a direct threat to the Constitution and democracy as we know it. This isn't about left or right. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. Trump has effectively hijacked the Republican Party with his own contradictory agenda to reach closer and closer to unopposed power. This is about whether we remain a democracy or slide into a dictatorship. The first actions of Trump's presidency have made one thing clear. His goal is to dismantle opposition within the government fast. Under sweeping executive order, Trump gave extraordinary authority to Elon Musk in order to shape federal staffing. The result, mass purges across regulatory agencies, FDA teams overseeing Neuralink, SEC officials investigating Elon's market manipulation, and entire cancer research initiatives gutted. But these weren't cost-cutting measures, these were targeted strikes, designed not to save the taxpayer money, but to silence oversight and opposition. In fact, these layoffs have ballooned costs. Agencies now rely on expensive contractors and have lost decades of institutional experience. And the message is chillingly clear. If you work for the government and try to do your job, especially if that job means standing up to billionaires like Elon Musk, you are expendable. Why would anyone with integrity choose to work for a government like this? By tying Elon Musk to these sweeping cuts, Trump gave himself a layer of plausible deniability. Musk's public image has deteriorated sharply in the last 5 years, and Trump knew it. So he let Musk take the heat, assigning him to the most unpopular tasks, from slashing cancer research to gutting regulations. This way, Trump's base could believe that the president was not behind it all, that Musk had simply gone rogue. But make no mistake, every move Musk made, Trump backed. And now that their alliance is fractured, Trump is cutting ties, not out of principle, but to shield himself from the political fallout of the cuts that he himself endorsed. Trump's attack on the foundation of American democracy didn't stop at gutting the bureaucracy. He went much, much further. In the first few months of his second presidency, thousands of Americans were detained and deported without due process, many under the pretense of being national security threats or foreign ties. Categories which are so vaguely defined that they included US citizens who merely criticized the administration online. Federal courts stepped in immediately. Multiple judges ruled that these deportations were unconstitutional, ordering that every detained individual must be granted a trial, something that has been afforded to every immigrant in the past. But Trump's Department of Homeland Security ignored these rulings. In some cases, deportations continued even after judges had issued injunctions. This is not a policy disagreement. This is a constitutional crisis. And where were these people sent? In a deeply suspicious move, the majority of these deportees were flown to El Salvador, a nation with rising political violence and no formal agreements to take in US deportees. Many had no legal or family ties there. Some had never even been. What did they have in common? They were seen as enemies of Trump's regime. Let that sink in. The President of the United States is defying court orders and deporting citizens to countries where they face persecution or death. If that is not a hostile takeover of our democracy, what is? Consider Mahmoud Kali, a 30-year-old lawful permanent resident and a graduate of Columbia University. He wasn't plotting violence or breaking the law. He was merely speaking out, protesting US policy on Israel's war in Gaza. In March, ICE agents showed up to his apartment claiming that his green card and student visa had been revoked. He was taken 1,200 miles away to a detainment center in rural Louisiana without warning, without hearing, and without due process. The Trump administration justified it under a Cold War-era law, reasoning that his activism posed a serious adverse foreign policy consequence. But in court, federal judges described his treatment as a charade of due process and a threat to free speech. In one stunning escalation, a New Jersey judge blocked any deportation only for the administration to defy the order and refuse to release him. Trump even went so far as to say that this is the first of many to come. This isn't about national security, it's about punishing dissent. Mahmoud did not break any laws, he merely protested peacefully, and yet Trump treated him like an enemy. This isn't just an isolated case. It is a test, a trial balloon to see what the public will tolerate. If Trump can detain and deport a peaceful protester in defiance of court orders, what's next? He's already targeted immigrants, even lawful residents, and now he's going after political dissenters. If unchecked, this crackdown won't stop there. Law-abiding citizens, journalists, critics, anyone who speaks out could be next. This is how authoritarianism creeps in. Not all at once, but one broken safeguard at a time. The deportation of Mahmoud Khalil wasn't just a violation of due process, it was a message. A line had been crossed and everyone knew it. Trump had moved from targeting bureaucrats and journalists to punishing individuals for their political beliefs. And when that punishment took the form of silent deportation without trial or recourse, fear turned to fury. In Los Angeles, where Khalil lived, studied, and spoke out, the response was immediate and overwhelming. What began as candlelit vigils and teach-ins quickly escalated into mass protests, setting the stage for one of the most pivotal confrontations of Trump's second term. The lead-up to the LA protests was a powder keg of outrage and fear. In the days following Mahmoud Khalil's deportation, student groups, civil rights organizations, and immigrant rights activists flooded social media with calls for action. University campuses became flashpoints with walkouts and sit-ins spreading from UCLA to Cal State campuses and high schools across the city. People weren't just protesting one man's deportation, they were protesting the system of fear and control being built around them. Then came Trump's overreach. Ignoring Governor Gavin Newsom's explicit refusal, Trump invoked an emergency order to deploy the National Guard to Los Angeles. Armed troops in military gear rolled through the streets of Westwood and downtown, creating a chilling image. A president using the US military to suppress peaceful dissent in a state that didn't ask for it. Tear gas was fired, drones hovered over crowds, protesters were kettled and arrested en masse. The moment was catalytic. Across the country, people watched the footage of militarized force used on American citizens and something snapped. The No Kings protests began in New York, Seattle, Atlanta, and dozens of other cities. People weren't just protesting Trump's latest move, they were rejecting the entire premise of authoritarianism taking root in America. "We didn't elect the king" became the rallying cry. Spray painted on walls, printed on homemade signs, and chanted through megaphones from coast to coast. The seeds of the No Kings protests were planted weeks before the National Guard ever hit the streets of Los Angeles, and a move that many dismissed as jokes, but is obviously anything but. Trump's campaign store quietly began selling Trump 2028 merchandise, all printed with something that should have been impossible under the Constitution. It wasn't a formal policy declaration, it was branding, but it was branding with intent. This wasn't about rallying the base, it was a strategic maneuver to gauge how far Trump could bend the guardrails without breaking them. He was daring the media to react, daring Democrats to challenge him, and daring his supporters to imagine him as more than a two-term president. And it worked. The merchandise sold out in days, and right-wing influencers began towing the party line. Why shouldn't Trump stay if people want him in? So, the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil ignited massive protests in Los Angeles. The public wasn't reacting to just a single abuse of power. They were reacting to a pattern, an accelerating slide toward authoritarianism. The image of the National Guard patrolling American streets against the will of California's own governor didn't spark outrage out of nowhere. It was a moment everything connected. The deportations, the disregard for the courts, the Trump 2028 hat worn proudly at rallies, that's when the chant began. 3 words that echoed from LA to DC, no kings here. This moment in history demands more than silence. We are facing a coordinated effort to dismantle the checks and balances that protect our rights, silent dissent, and consolidate power into the hands of the few. The protests sparked in Los Angeles and echoed across the country show one thing clearly. The people are not asleep. We are watching, we are organizing, and we are standing up. But protest alone is not enough. The streets are powerful, but so are the ballot boxes. Every rally, every chant, every act of resistance must be matched by action at the polls. This coming election, we must show up in numbers too big to ignore. We must vote for leaders who will continue to restore the rule of law, rebuild trust in our institutions, and hold those in power accountable. The choice is clear. Democracy won't defend itself, we do. So keep marching, keep speaking, and above all, vote blue, or else Trump will have a third term. There is no third option. Our only chance is to unite against the Republicans and against Trump. Anything else is letting Trump win. Period.